Welcome to Raiders on the Record, the podcast featuring Hastings High School athletics. I'm Athletic Director Trent Hansen. My colleague Tim Hanneberg and I work together to bring you the stories of Raider sports. We are thrilled to share conversations with the athletes, coaches, and alumni that represent Raider Nation. Check back weekly and be sure to share this podcast with your friends in the Raiders Network. Today's episode features Erin Ditty Ahneman. Erin is a 1997 graduate of Hastings High School and was a two-time All-State selection in both volleyball and basketball. During her time as a Raider, Erin earned 15 varsity letters and was named All-Conference an incredible 13 times in volleyball, basketball, and golf. She finished her basketball career as the all-time leading scorer in school history, holding that position for over 15 years, and she currently is third on the list with 1,608 career points. Erin's on a short list of Minnesota high school athletes to reach both the 1,000-point milestone in basketball and the 1,000-kill milestone in volleyball. Erin qualified and competed in 6 different state tournaments as an individual and a team in all 3 of her sports, which included the only state volleyball team in school history in 1995 and the incredible state championship girls basketball team of 1996. Erin was a finalist for Miss Basketball and went on to compete in both hoops and golf for North Dakota State University. This was a really fun conversation. We hope you enjoy it. Tell us about the schools that you were attending when you grew up and what was your grad year from Hastings High School?
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of kindergarten through 4th grade attending Pinecrest Elementary School, which was just an amazing experience. Coralyn Mortensen was the principal at the time, and she was just one of the most genuinely just very affectionate people, but also could really hold the kids accountable when she needed to. And she was a dear friend of my mom's from working in the school district. So Pinecrest for kindergarten through 4th grade. And then for 5th grade, I was actually a part of the first graduating class from Krista McAuliffe Elementary. And that was just a real privilege to be a part of that school as well, having it be open the very first year. And then being that first 5th grade class out of that school was a really exciting time, obviously for a sad reason, but it was a wonderful celebration of Krista McAuliffe's life and then her legacy and bravery. But then also it was just a great opportunity for Hastings to have a brand new elementary school and name it in her honor. But I remember it was a big deal because we had color computer screens at Krista McAuliffe. That was huge. And then Mr. Evenson was our principal, who I know many people remember as well, as he would come out and play flag football with us at recess. He'd be the all-time quarterback. And then went on to middle school. And then my high school, of course, was now the current middle school. But yeah, and then graduated in 1997.
There you go. Most let people do that. Yeah, you're still
yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Well, tell us a little bit about like your family unit growing up, like siblings, parents, guardians, extended, kind of just what was that internal support network like for you at home?
Right. My mom and dad were from Marshall, Minnesota and Delano, Minnesota, respectively. And my mom worked for the school district here in Hastings. And my dad did for the first, good few years of my life as well. My mom was the district data coordinator, or at least that was the position that she had moved to by the time I was in high school. So she was a really important part of the school district, running the scheduling for both classes, busing. She worked with all of the homeschooling students and families as well to make sure they were receiving the support from the school district that they needed. And then my dad started out as a elementary Phi Ed teacher and high school Phi Ed teacher, and then also coached basketball and baseball for the Raiders for a good few years before he made a professional switch over into the sales world, where he retired for Norex in Prior Lake, about 8 years ago now, and he retired as their CEO after starting as a salesman in 1985. So Mom and Dad stayed in Hastings. Dad had a heck of a commute to Prior Lake, but I wanted to be a Raider, so he obliged. And I had my two sisters with me as well. My sister Jana, who was a 1988 graduate of Hastings High School. She was a basketball and volleyball player. Jana went on to play volleyball at St. Mary's. And now she has been a microbiology professor at the University of St. Paul. She is now an associate dean there as well. And she lives in South Minneapolis with her husband and young son. And then my sister Jean graduated in 91, also volleyball and basketball participant and player. And then she went on to go to St. Cloud State. So she was nice and close to home to support me through my high school career in athletics. And then she lives in Chicago now. So we get to have some nice family vacays to the heart of Chicago. She's just a few blocks in from Navy Pier. Yeah. So the boys, that's one of their favorite places to go, is visit Aunt Jean.
Sweet.
And that was my core. That was my innermost network of people that helped shape me into the individual that I am today. They've all been such important parts of my life. Interestingly enough, though, Jana and Jean are both 9 and 6 years older than me. So Jana has always almost been kind of like a second mom to me. Yeah. Very nurturing, held me accountable on the athletic court. She's the first one to have comments for me after the games.
Okay.
Well, excuse me, Dad was first, but then after that, Jana would have something to say. And then Jean as well. Jean and Mom would always give me the big hug first. Mom would just say, "You were my favorite player on the court tonight." And after every game. And sometimes it drove me nuts, but now I realize how much how important that consistency was to me. Yeah. And then Jean too, but then Jean would give me critique, a whole lot of love and a whole lot of accountability in my household growing up.
Awesome. When you think of your earliest like sports memories, not necessarily even organized sports, just playing, you know, was it, you know, something in the cul-de-sac? Was it watching your sisters play? Like, what do you kind of just remember as maybe those earliest memories of what sports actually were?
Right. I'm going to do some name dropping here, Trent, for no other reason than to make it very clear to anyone listening how influenced I was by the Hastings community growing up. So my very earliest memories would have been running around in the high school gym while my dad was an assistant coach for the boys basketball team. Actually, he was the head coach for a while too. One of the first names I ever remember watching kind of go up and down the court, flying all over the place, was a gentleman by the name of Craig Kilborn. Mm-hmm. And Craig went on to a nice career with ESPN, and I still follow him on Instagram. He's a hoot.
He owes us a podcast, by the way. We were supposed to record one this summer. So when we come back to that one, I'll let you know when.
All right. We've shared like 2 DMs over the last few years. So I will do what I can to send Craig a message. But yeah, watching Craig play, watching my dad coach. And then my dad also spent a few years assisting Mary Bartley coaching the girls basketball team. So, you know, that whole, if you see it, you can be it. Well, mine was Edie Boyer, arguably, and in my opinion, the greatest female athlete to ever come out of Hastings. And watching her compete, and then not only compete, but to do it with what was technically a disability, with the loss of her hearing, and watching her adapt. So it was just interesting, because I can remember even realizing, you know, at a young age, that there's a lot more boys doing this than there are girls. But, you know, if you hang out and you know what you're doing, you can compete. Right. And I remember kind of watching Edie and going, wow, she competes kind of like the boys. She competes like I do. Like, you don't necessarily know she's a girl. She's just out there competing. And I got to watch Edie on the basketball court, but then also just to be influenced by her when I get to go into practices. And she was always so kind and so warm. And it didn't matter that she had a disability that maybe held her back from communicating in the way that she wanted to. She would still walk right up to me and start talking to me as if it was just, you know, an easy conversation. And that was a really important aspect, because I think it was the first time I was really introduced to having a relationship with someone that had a disability of some sort. And And that's important because you start to realize that those disabilities are really turn into abilities in many ways. A lot of times, that deficit can be what pushes us to greatness, because we have to work harder because we have this deficit that others don't. And so what a lesson to be able to learn by watching Edie. And probably not a huge coincidence that I followed in her footsteps by going to NDSU, but yeah, just a great person to be influenced by. Another huge influence in my life was Vicki Davis. Vicki, growing up, would bring me up to the University of Minnesota. She would bring me to women's gopher volleyball games. And then she would also bring me to women's basketball games. Our family were season ticket holders for the Gophers for years, but it was for men's. And, Vicki, I think, knew right away that I had a fire in me that wanted to compete and wanted to be an athlete. And she knew who my dad was, and what a successful athlete he was. So, but she wanted to get me in front of the other girls. She wanted me to see that, yeah, there are other females doing this. And, what a blessing for that too. Yeah. So I'm 7 years old now, and I've already been influenced by some of these amazing people, not to mention my dad golfing with Don Satzer every weekend. So I'd walk the course with them as they played. So I learned the game of golf walking the Hastings Country Club with Don Satzer, who, of course, at the time was the boys' golf coach in Hastings. I shouldn't say, of course, during my time from, in that mid to late 90s.
Sure.
So got to learn a lot about the game of golf from him, in those young ages growing up. Again, when there weren't too many other little girls out on the golf course, but I'd go out and, hit range balls and still be encouraged by these men who could see that there was talent there. So let's nurture it. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, that's talent. Let's see what we can make happen. That's just a glimpse of some of the people that I was influenced by, in those early stages. And then you get to the likes of, middle school and so forth. I don't know if you want me to jump to that trend. I don't want to go.
That's okay. Well, maybe think about it this way. I mean, I love the phrase, if you can see it, you can be it, whether that's in athletics or anything else, being that exposure to what's possible. So then, how did it transfer into what you chose to do in terms of did you sign up for a team? Did you just get out in the yard and play with the neighborhood kids? Was it a little bit of both? What are those earliest memories of you actually playing the game then yourself? You've seen others in their environments. When did it start becoming your thing?
Right. Yeah, it really is that if you can see it, you can be it. So I had the influences of some great athletes and watching them compete as I was growing up. I talked about Edie Boyer, another great athlete that I watched intently because my sister played with her. My sister Jean was Melody Subzak, who was an incredible volleyball player and a really good basketball player too. But volleyball was her love, and she went on to play at Kentucky for college. But again, just seeing not only the level of talent, but the intensity of the competitiveness. Those women showed me that, or excuse me, I suppose young women at the time showed me that it was okay to not only compete physically, but it was also okay to put all your emotion into it. Mm-hmm. And that was really the only way I knew how to compete anyways. So that was a nice, it was a nice opportunity for me to see that was going to be okay, and that could pay off, and that, you could have the people around you lift their level of play based on the emotion that you show, and based on, the fact that they can see how emotionally invested you are, and then your teammates become emotionally invested as well. But growing up, I'd be in the gym, I'd be out at halftime shooting at any game when I'd have the opportunity, or as soon as the games would be over, my dad would chuck a ball to me and then I could go out and shoot. And I would shoot for an hour and a half. I'd shoot as long as I could until we had to leave the gym. And then we didn't have a gym, we didn't have gym access growing up. Right. So I was blessed enough to grow up next door to the Jim and Joe Johnson family, and Rosemary Court.
Yeah.
And
Bunch of goofballs in that house.
a bunch of goofballs, I tell you.
Yeah.
But I was the same age. Well, I was
their backyard though, right?
Yeah. So we started out, the first one Jim put out was actually out in the cul-de-sac.
Ah.
So that was kind of nice because, we had kind of an open area and then you would just shoot. And then the ball would kind of just go into the neighbor's yard, which is a little bit of an uphill incline. So it would kind of roll back down too. Mm-hmm. I spent hours. And one of the best parts was that Jim and Joe's youngest, Mark, was a year younger than me. And so Mark and I grew up not only as friends, but, sometimes it wasn't so friendly because we were constantly competing against each other. I owe a lot of my athletic success to that Johnson family for putting up that hoop, but also for providing me with their youngest son as my main focus of competition for many years. So we had the hoop out front that Jim put in. Then he went ahead and, I want to say it was right before we got into high school. He put a concrete slab in the backyard, which now you see them everywhere.
Right.
But at the time, unheard of.
Yeah.
But leave it to Jim.
Yeah.
And his
brilliance
and his 3M engineering mind. He came up with this. Put a concrete slab in the backyard. I remember walking over, watching the guys pouring the concrete, going, "What's going on?" Mark's like, "We're putting in a hoop." And I'm like, "Well," and then it happened, and we played on that all the time. Mm-hmm. And we had great neighbors. That cul-de-sac was the best. It was the Spinelli Moore family, the Duncan family. Then we had the Sedlacek family next door. Pete Sedlacek was another one who put a hoop in his driveway and let me use that over the years as well. Because, God forbid Tom Ditty put one in, but I guess he knew he had neighbors he could count on. Yeah. I don't know. I've still never really asked him why he never did that, but I guess I didn't have to because we had Jim and Pete to save the day. But yeah, growing up in the cul-de-sac playing, the Spinelli Moores had a son, Trevor, as well. He would be out shooting hoops with us all the time. My dad shot with me constantly. We'd work out anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. And, it was less cardio and much more fundamental. Dad was huge on the fundamentals. So we spent a lot of time on, kind of the technical aspects of my shot, working on that muscle memory so that each time you make the shot, no matter what part of the game, your body's doing the same thing. Right. So that was huge as well, to be able to go and have that time in the gym with him. And then I had great friends. Katie Ertel and I would meet anywhere around town. We'd play tennis. We'd meet up with a big group of kids and we'd play soccer. I spent a ton of time down at Pioneer Park shooting hoops. That was, we didn't have a YMCA like the kids have access to now. We were outside at the park shooting. So we'd go down to Pioneer Park quite a bit. Just that was a nice central location for everybody to meet. And there would always be pickup games going on down there. And that was really fun. Otherwise, down by where Katie Hertel lived, they had a park down by that area too. So we'd meet and shoot there. It was wherever you could find a place to play. Yep. And don't get me wrong, I did other things besides just playing sports as well. But the cool thing was it wasn't just basketball. It was, I played tennis until 7th grade. Katie and I played each other in the Rivertone Days tennis tournament championship in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
That's fantastic.
So before Katie and I got to be teammates, we had to be fierce competitors in multiple sports. But we just were like, whatever, put a tennis racket in our hand. All right, let's do it. It was kind of, and I think for Katie too, it was just, if it was a competition, it was fun. Mm-hmm. So let's do it. But outside a lot, and just, you had to get creative to figure out ways to get that workout in. But then, when you got there and you had the time to work out, you sure used it to the best of your ability because it wasn't always at your fingertips to be able to do it.
I really appreciate you sharing a couple things. One is the people and the experiences that were so influential on you at those early stages. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that you're framing well is just what it was like growing up at the time. And we're not talking about the 50s here. You know what I mean? We're only going back
No,
one
right.
generation, but it was very different. I mean, you're talking about this real organic, um, soccer, tennis, guys, girls, any age, at the park, in the yard. It's just so different than the way that kids grow up learning and being exposed to most parts of sport today, where oftentimes their
Right.
earliest exposure is highly organized. It's with an adult or adults in charge. You didn't have any of that, right? And we'll transition and
No.
talk, not any of that. I mean, you had, opportunities, of course, for youth sports, but my point is that it was an era where that's what sport was. Again, it was outside, it was with a variety of people and places. And it's just so fun to listen to you talk about all those different ways that you engaged. And you're arguably one of the 5 most decorated athletes that have ever graduated from this high school, not female in particular, right? For people that are listening, we're not talking just females. I may get the math wrong, so you can correct me, or I'll make sure it's correct in the bio, but I think we're talking about like 15 varsity letters. I mean, you're going 3 varsity sports as early as 7th grade in a couple of them. We're talking volleyball in the fall, basketball in the winter, golf in the spring. I love hearing that you had some soccer and some tennis and some other driveway stuff on the way. Tell us a little bit about what that foundation was like then once you transferred into that world of organized high school sports, right? So as you start playing in 8th, 9th, 10th grade, what's the connection to that youth foundation in terms of the people or the places or those experiences? Kind of what impact did that have on you as a high school athlete, basically?
Playing a wide variety of sports when I was younger, which was sometimes a necessity, right? Because I wanted to play, I wanted to go out, I wanted to be active. And if you couldn't find enough players to put together a basketball game, then you were walking down the street and you saw a football game and you said, well, I'll play that then instead. It was really a necessity. I'd say the same thing from a boy, girl, or a talent perspective too. Didn't matter. You needed the bodies. So you were not only out there competing, it was a cool experience too, because you were oftentimes by necessity, almost kind of a coach out there too. Anyone who knew what they were doing had to explain to the other kids what was going on so that they could play well. And even more importantly, so we had a chance to win. Right.
Yeah.
So
having the game is one thing, and then being able to win the game is the second thing, but you have to have both. Yeah.
Absolutely. You got to have both. So it was so fun. And I was so, you don't even realize at the time how lucky you are, but I guess I wouldn't have really cared if I was the only girl around. But as I got older and once like 3rd, 4th grade came around, then Katie Urtel was around. She had moved towards our end of town. So it was kind of fun that I had a girl around. But I'll never forget when Jeff Oakman came up to me one day and he said, yeah, there's a girl moving here. She's going to come to Pinecrest next year. She's an even better athlete than you are. And I went, what? And then I met her and I was like, crap, he's right. And so, we spent a lot of years competing, but the amount of respect that you build for someone through that competition, I preach this to my kids all the time. Competitor does not equal enemy.
Love it.
It just doesn't. Yeah. They're your competition. They are your opponent, but they are not your enemy. Enemies are for, when there's, I don't want to say wars because sports is a war. Right. Let's be honest.
Right.
But the best athletes and the truest athletes are those that have spread themselves across so many different opportunities throughout sports and throughout the community that you no longer have the option to be enemies with your opponents, because you've been opponents now with everyone, right? And when you become then a friend with someone that you've competed against, and when you become a teammate with someone that you spent time competing against, it's like this whole nother level, because there was already this level of respect established prior to when you develop the relationship. But one thing that I will say really helped me growing up and playing multiple sports, prior to high school, was just the different pressures involved in each sport.
Okay.
So you've got your team sports, which have always been my favorite, but then you've got your more individual sports too, like, your tennis, or you've got I never did swimming, but awesome swimming in Hastings as well, or golf. where you're taking that turn to experience what it's like when you have teammates, but those teammates aren't going to affect your individual outcome, if that makes sense. So in basketball, the performance of my teammates affects how I do in the outcome of the game, win or lose. As far as, in a tennis game or in my golf match, yes, my score would affect the overall team score, but the overall team score didn't affect my individual score, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So it's a whole different level of pressure on the individual. And golf was never my favorite. The team sports were always my favorite because I love that aspect of the team unity, the bonding, the camaraderie. But the pressure that you learn to deal with in those situations of like a more individual sport, or gosh, even if you're in baseball and you're a pitcher on a pitching mound,
yeah,
that pressure, it's really hard to duplicate that within a single sport. But you'll notice that when you experience that pressure in one sport, that experience carries over into the other sports as well. And I got to see that, firsthand throughout high school on many occasions. But by the time I did get into high school, I had already had a lot of that experience under my belt, as far as not necessarily in an organized high school sport fashion, but, competing when pride was on the line, and competing when you wanted to beat, your friends, or you wanted to get in that one last game, one last W before you had to go in for lunch or dinner. So I think that there was a lot of carryover in that aspect, and it undoubtedly helped, lead me to success in the high school area as well. And had some amazing coaches in middle school as well. Dennis Crosby was our middle school traveling basketball coach. His son's Chad, and I know Craig was closer to my age. Craig was a great basketball player, and I know he played football too. But yeah, no daughters, no nieces, no family. Just out of the goodness of his heart and the love of the game of basketball, said, sure, I'll coach some 7th and 8th grade girls in traveling basketball. So he came and coached us. And then Alyssa Hoff, who was a senior when I was a freshman, a senior when I was an 8th grader, another huge sports influence for me. Alyssa was a great basketball player and played up in Bemidji State in college, and was just an amazing influence on me, and was the first one to ever walk up to me in open gym and say, have you ever heard of AAU basketball? And I was in 7th, going into 8th grade. I said, no, what's that? She's like, well, there's this program, North Harton, and you need to be on it. You need to be in it. You need to be a part of it. And so somehow Alyssa got the information to my parents. Alyssa had two older sisters, Heather and Sarah. Heather graduated with my sister, Jana. Sarah graduated with my sister, Jean. And they were athletes in volleyball and basketball as well. And then, so I knew Alyssa because of our family connection. And then sure enough, by that summer after 8th grade, it was my first year playing AAU. And I had the pleasure of playing for the best, still, I believe, the best AAU program in the state, if not the nation, for North Tartan. And so that was kind of my start, kind of getting projected into high school. And then, as you alluded to, I was a 13-time varsity athlete. I was the 13-time all-conference athlete. So when I was in 7th grade, that was my first opportunity to play a varsity sport. I was on the varsity golf team. Mr. Schultz and Miss Bartley were the coaches at the time, and they were just amazing to give me this opportunity to play. And it was a sport that I had grown up playing. I got my first set of clubs, I think, from Santa in 3rd grade. It was like an iron, a wood, and a putter. And really enjoyed it. And so that was my first opportunity to play golf, to play at the varsity level. And that was with the golf team when I was in 7th grade. And then as an 8th grader, qualified for my first state golf tournament. And that was just an awesome experience. Again, getting to play and experience my first state tournament, and then to experience in a sport where it was, really all that pressure was falling on me. And boy, did I tank. I played awful. I was terrible. And I mean, it was the first time I don't know if it was just kind of intimidating, but I remember walking the 18 holes on the first day and just being exhausted. My dad was watching. He was like, "Are you okay?" And I was just like, "I don't know." And I really think it was the first time that I really like cracked under pressure.
Sure.
I think I shot like a 112 the first day, something just awful.
Yeah.
And kind of went home, and I remember my dad, who was usually pretty tough on me, even he was kind of nice, like, geez, what just happened there? Like, and I mean, I was okay emotionally, but I just couldn't put anything together. And so then I went back the next day and I think I shot like a 90. So much better. Something, the coaches could be a little more proud of, and that I wouldn't be so embarrassed that was printed in the newspaper. But yeah, that was kind of my first experience there of dealing with that pressure. And then, yeah, like literally being, gosh, an eighth grader. So I was 12 years old, I think at the time, being like, wow, they're going to print that score in the paper and I'm going to be so embarrassed. Like at 12 years old, having that be a thought, and then thinking, well, we're going to fix this. So then you go to work, right? You go to work so that this isn't going to happen again.
Right.
So then, golf was great. Individual state tournament as an eighth grader, missed the state tournament by one stroke as a ninth grader. So had the horrible state tournament appearance and showing in eighth grade, turn around, missed it by a stroke in ninth grade.
Okay.
And then 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, we qualified. I qualified as an individual, but then we also qualified as a team.
Awesome.
So then 10th, 11th, and 12th grade went as a team.
So those experiences in 8th and 9th didn't define you, right? I mean, there's an opportunity to learn there, right? And we can process those experiences a lot of different ways, but it sounds like it didn't back into that proverbial corner, and maybe inspired you a little bit differently. But sometimes that failing or that difficulty or that struggle can not only make things on the back end even more rewarding, but it sometimes can be a little bit of a launching pad into a different experience. Did you feel some of that in golf at least?
100%.
Okay.
Sometimes oftentimes the biggest motivator is defeat. And that's certainly what kept me going. Golf was never my basketball or my volleyball. Like that, it was always, in that third spot, but I still wanted to be really good at it. I still wanted to be as good as I could be. And it wasn't going to get the time and effort that basketball and volleyball did, but it still got a lot of time and effort. And it was also a sport that, I could go out and do with my family. My mom and my dad both played. So that was great, but defeat oftentimes brings out the motivation that we need to actually bring us to that next level. Right. Had I gone and done well at the state tournament, and well would have been a 90 and a 90, not great, not even good, but well enough for an eighth grader.
Yeah.
But would that have got me to get out to the driving range every day that summer? Would that have convinced me to mow the grass a little bit shorter, to somehow replicate a putting green in any way that I could in the back corner of my cars, in the back corner of our yard, so that I could try to improve my putting, which never improved, by the way.
Didn't cut it short enough.
God dang it. But no, I mean, it was the work that I put in was a product of that heartbreak, of that disappointment, of really feeling that embarrassment that I just blew it. I blew it big, and everybody's going to know, or everybody who cares is going to know. So it was really that trajectory. I think our biggest lessons come in loss. In victory, yes, we'll go back and we'll look and we'll see what we did well, what worked. But rarely are we looking at wins going, what could we have done better, because we won, right?
Right.
It's those losses where we can go back and kind of pull apart those performances and actually identify, the deficits and what we need to improve on, so that next time we do win.
So
And
one
then,
more, one more on golf before we transition.
yeah,
When you think of those 10th, 11th, and 12th years where you've got not only the individual but the team qualifying and all that success, is there a moment or a round or a shot or a tournament that maybe sticks out above the rest as maybe just most memorable for you for any kind of reason? But
right.
there's a lot to pull from there, so it might not be even a fair question, but I'll try to throw these at you.
No,
But when you think of golf, is there something that sticks out from those years that really is a lightning rod for you?
100%. And it all comes back to team with me. I love being on teams. I still love being on teams. I love family because it's a team. I love, it's just when you've got, these other people in your corners and you're working together to figure out everyone's strengths and how you put those strengths together the best to project the team to victory. That's my favorite. And 10th grade was that first year that we qualified for the state tournament as a team. And it was exciting for many reasons, but my teammates at the time, one of them in particular was the incomparable Leslie Miller, who was the center on our basketball team. Sure. Miss Finesse. She had the greatest shooting touch. And let me tell you, it carried over onto the golf course. She was a great golfer. And I'm sure she still is if Leslie still plays. But we had, a fun team. Missy Welch was also on the team. Emily Wallen, Jessie Minder, who were two girls in my class who were dear friends of mine. Jessie Minder and I grew up as neighbors in backyards, and Jessie and I are still dear friends to this day. And everybody knows and loves Jim and Jeannie. Mr. Minder had him as an economics teacher as well. And then, of course, their youngest, James, who I would babysit and rough up in the neighborhood every once in a while. But Jessie Minder, and then Emily Wallen, who was the daughter of our blessed late pastor at St. Philip's, Phil Wallen. They moved to town in 10th grade. Well, my mom and Pastor Phil Wallen had gone to college together at Augsburg in Minneapolis. So I had met Emily off and on through our childhood, and now here they moved to town. And 10th grade was the first year that Emily and I got to be teammates as well. And then we go ahead and we qualify for the state tournament. So it was a really, really special deal because of the teammates that were with me for the ride. And it was so fun. And Miss Bartley and Mr. Schultz were just such supportive coaches. And I have no doubt it was frustrating for them at times, because I'm sure they were like, geez, Erin, if you would put the time into golf that you do into basketball and volleyball, we could get you out on that LPGA tour, because I could hit the ball a ton. But it just wasn't as much of a love as basketball and volleyball. And thankfully for me, I had coaches that understood that and supported and loved me anyways. Yeah. But it was just great. And that first state tournament, getting to go up to Bunker Hills, felt like a really big deal. And having gone in 8th grade, but by myself. And then now going in 10th grade, and I'm going with my whole team.
It's one of the gifts of sports, right? The community aspect, and community can mean a lot of different things, but the way you're describing it too is that internal dynamic with the 6, 7, 8 of you, however that, what a difference it made. That's pretty cool.
Well, and it was the fun, but it was also, the support, if I can say it, the older I get, the more I realize that it's really our success in life, or our ability to handle difficult situations in life, I should say, is really up to the support system that we have around us. I've seen a lot of people go through some really difficult things in life, and they've had amazing support systems around them, and even have had, in some instances, a really strong faith that they could fall back on. And that faith provided them with the support that they needed. In 10th grade, and always being with a team meant I had that emotional support as well. If I tanked like I did in 8th grade at the state tournament, I then was able to go to my teammates and get a hug, get a pat on the back, and, oh geez, I had a tough day too, or you'll get them tomorrow. And that difference between those two experiences was 100% because I had the support of my team. So it made it a lot more fun, and it just made it feel safer too, to go up there and to put myself out there, because I knew I had people that were going to be there for me if it didn't go the way I wanted to.
No, you framed it well. So let's take a second on the other two sports, which we could probably do a singular recording on each. So let's talk volleyball for a second, and just give us kind of a encapsulated, what was that journey like? And then really same question for you that I asked about golf. In the midst of all those experiences and all those years and all those teammates, is there a game, is there a tournament, is there a teammate, is there a moment that might kind of rise above the rest that's just most memorable or significant for you? So just tell us a little bit about your volleyball experience for the Raiders.
Yeah. So I was in 8th grade and I was practicing with the 8th grade volleyball team. And Bitsy Lean was my coach, the 8th grade volleyball coach. And it's fun to be saying all these names. I just love it. Bitsy Lean. Oh, I love it. I love it. And so, she was the coach, and the varsity coach at the time was Coach Dahlem, Teresa Dahlem. And coach came over to practice one day, and I guess someone had told her to just come over and take a look at me and watch me just playing with the 8th graders. And she came in. I didn't even know she was there. In and out. I was oblivious to it, which is the right way to do it. Right. And so, but then it was later on, either that day or the next day, that my dad said, "Hey, we got a call and they want you to go, practice with the 9th grade volleyball team." And I was like, cool. Oh my gosh. Like, I couldn't believe it. And it worked out well that my mom worked at the middle school, or what was the middle school at the time. So she was upstairs in the district data office, or the district office. She worked very closely with Superintendent LaCroix, and then others in that back office area. So she was already at the middle school. So then she could drive me over to the high school to get me there in time for practice every day. So a short jaunt, but mom was busy. So bless her for doing that. But she'd run me over to the high school, and then I started working out with the 9th grade volleyball team. And the 9th grade volleyball team's coach was an amazing woman by the name of June Courteau. And June Courteau, if you knew her, you loved her. The best, one of the most emotionally genuine people you'll ever learn. I learned as much from Coach Courteau about handling my emotions than I did even about volleyball. And I learned so much about volleyball and basketball from her.
Sure.
So Coach Dahlem and Coach Courteau were varsity and 9th grade coaches. Of course now, and I'll say Dahlem and Courteau, that's what we always said. But now they've been married for over 20 plus years. They're both retired, but they both were NCAA women's basketball referees. They both refereed in the WNBA. They're in Hall of Fames all over the country. I think Coach Courteau is in the National Basketball Hall of Fame. Just an unbelievable couple, and a huge influence in my life, which all started with volleyball. And there's still big influences in my life today, but it all started with volleyball and them deciding that they would give me a chance to come up and see what I could do. And so then I started working out with the 9th grade team, and then did that for about 3 weeks, maybe 4. And then they said, you know what, we're going to move you up to the JV. So again, very exciting. But I won't lie. I was, I was a 13-year-old girl, or maybe I was 12. I was 12. And I was trying to make friends, trying to be my competitive self without ticking off anyone who was older. And, but also, trying to make friends along the way. And so, kind of that year I learned I could make people laugh. And if I could make people laugh, then they wouldn't be so mad when I made them mad
break down some
on the court. Right. So I started utilizing a sense of humor to kind of work my way in there. And, it's tough for people to be mad at you when they're laughing at you or when you're making them laugh. So, ended up playing JV that year and using my sense of humor to kind of work my way in as this little nerdy 8th grader. So I wasn't upsetting, the juniors that I was playing with. And had a blast. That was a really important time because that was my first opportunity to play with the girls then that I would play with the following year when I was a freshman. So it was Amy Ring was the setter who would then be the starting setter for the varsity the following year. So that was a really important year for me to Amy and I to get used to each other. And, you know, Amy is this, she's just a workhorse, right? She had great hands, just had great footwork so that she could always get underneath the ball in time to make a good set. And then she's got this little 8th grader who's, you know, just kind of spazzy running around. And I knew the game of volleyball, but I hadn't really become a student of it yet. So it was really just me working off of pure athleticism. And not really understanding, you know, a scheme. What is that, you know, or anything that was really going on. So Amy had to do a lot of, you know, teaching me along the way as well. And then it was Rochelle Nielsen was the JV coach at the time. So Miss Nielsen was kind of my first, after Courteau was kind of my introduction to volleyball as well. And she taught me a lot. In fact, if I'm thinking about it now, I'm thinking maybe it was Rochelle that told Coach Down to come over and take a look, because that summer before they were doing the volleyball camp for Hastings High School. And my dad always said, hey, whenever there's a camp going on, just go sit in the gym. They'll eventually invite you to come out and participate. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm really young. He's like, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They'll invite you to, especially if they see like you look interested. So I walk into the gym and then sure enough, Rochelle Nielsen, I was 7th grade. So I was probably 11 years old now. Come out here. It looks like you know what you're doing. Cause I was just kind of hitting the ball against the wall, but more so she could tell I wanted to do it. So bless her. She's like, get out here. And so for the next like 3 days, I got to participate in this high school volleyball camp as a 7th grader, and everyone was super nice. And then, you know, again, that paid off, just hanging out in the gym and being there at the right time or making your right time. So then we move on to freshman year. And now this is my first time playing varsity. And now I've spent time over the summer going to camps. I started to learn a little bit more. I'm becoming more of a student of the game. I am lucky because my dad was a volleyball player as well. He played for the Beer Stube. And yeah, I think, or maybe it was Luscious was volleyball. Anyways, he had a group of guys that he played with, Tom Dahlberg, who they called Thunder because it sounded like thunder whenever he hit the ball. So Mr. Dahlberg, oh gosh, there was a whole, Jake Moore was the setter. And I grew up watching those guys. I'd go into the gym and watch them play volleyball. So you had guys like that were influencing me as well. So now I'm in high school. I've had a chance to learn a little bit more about the game. And now it's the, you know, fall of my freshman year. No one has any idea who I am. No one has any idea, you know, who's coming up as the young talent in the conference. And then, you know, we go. And I was really good. I was, and I was so aggressive. And I figured out, one person told me the heart, you know, the strength that you hit the ball, all is coming from your core, all from that pike, that core part in your stomach, like the last part you'd think it would be. No, it's got to come from my arms, right? No. You just, you know, squeeze and get into that position and you're going to put the ball down. So now I've learned how to do that. Now I've developed some different talents and then ended up being all conference freshman, sophomore, junior, senior seasons. So all conference, all through high school there. And then actually that 9th grade year, we made it to the region championships. We lost a heartbreaker in 5 games or 5 sets to Roseville. And that was when Amy Ring was a senior. Kelly Junker was our great outside hitter. Christine Sabitis. You had me and Emily Gruden in the middle. And figuring out my right side hitter is going to drive me crazy. I know Cindy Thomas was one of them. Oh, this is going to drive me nuts. But anyways, we had a great team. Yes, Jody Biscoe. Jody Dibble was later right side, but Jody Biscoe. And we just had a great team. We made it to that region championship and then lost a heartbreaker. But that was a really fun year. And I think, you know, it was a time where we realized like, wow, we could not only be good, we could be great. So then moved into sophomore year was a great year. And then junior year was our outstanding year. And it was, interesting. And my junior year in sports, that was 1995, 96, was just a banner year for sports across the board. But I'll bring up again that spring was the first state tournament. Spring of my sophomore year was that first team state tournament that I had played in. And it was that first experience. And then I had also had that state tournament experience in 8th grade where I'd really just kind of blown it. And so junior year, we won the region tournament and we made it to state. And that's still the only year Hastings ever has for volleyball. Because we're always in great regions and there's just crazy amounts of talent. But that junior year, and I will say too, the summer of my sophomore year was the first year that I was introduced to JO volleyball. So I had been playing North Tartan AAU basketball for 2 years. Now I was asked to come and play for the premier JO volleyball team at the time, Northern Lights, who was coached by a gentleman by the name of Doug Bergman, who went on to start M1 and who is a legend in girls volleyball in Minnesota. And he just said, hey, come play. And Dennis Amundsen was another gentleman who is a volleyball legend in Minnesota. His nickname is Ami. And he has spent time coaching at the University of Minnesota. He's been at Mankato. He's at St. Thomas now, I believe, assisting. But he was the other coach then that helped out there. And ironically enough, our family had known Ami for years because he and my dad worked the scoreboard together at the Metrodome for Twins baseball games.
There you go.
Full circle. So Ami finds out, and we actually played Harding my sophomore year, and he was the coach at Harding at the time. So he said, let's get this girl in and let's make her a student of the game and see how far she could take this. So that summer after sophomore year, then I learn schemes. I learn so much. I'm playing with the best talent in the state. My teammate was Wiz Bachman, who went on to play at Stanford and who is now Wiz McCutcheon. She's married to Hugh, the head coach of the U of M. The talent was unbelievable. And I wasn't nearly as good as the other girls, but I was a quick learner. So they kept me around and it was so fun. And so then junior year now, I've got that under my belt. And so now we qualify for the state tournament in volleyball. And now I'm ready to go. And I'm going, I am not doing what I did in golf. I'm going to go and I am going to bring it. And I'm going to be so nervous, but that's okay. I've done it before. I've handled the nerves before. And now I get to do it in front of a crowd, which is way better. On the golf course, it's quiet on the tee. In the gym, it was just loud and super fun. And we had great fans. So that was fun. So yeah, we made it it's played at the St. Paul Civic Center, which does that even exist anymore? I don't think.
Well, it's what the Excel Center is now for the
kids
listening. That's what,
the kids. Yes, the kids, the young kids. So yeah, we played at the Civic Center, and unfortunately, we went 0-2 at the state tournament. We played Owatonna in the opening round. We dropped 3 games to them. They were so good. They had a girl that played middle blocker for them. Her name was Krista Bird. She went on and played basketball at Wisconsin, but she was very good. And so we dropped 3 games to them there. And then in our next game, we actually dropped, we lost in 5 sets to Bloomington Jefferson, whose coach at the time was Doug Bergman. And so I was playing against the man who had taught me everything he knew about the game. And so our team, didn't do as well as we had hoped, but, the moral victory was there because, we had made it, we had qualified. And then, when we really looked at it, we weren't the best team there. We weren't. And so we dropped 2, but we played well. We played hard. And individually, I played very well. Had 27 kills in the game against Bloomington Jefferson alone. And was able to earn a spot onto the all tournament team, which really meant a lot. The individual honors never meant as much to me as the team ones. And I was raised so that they wouldn't mean as much as the team ones, very intentionally. But that was really cool because if we couldn't win as a team, to be able to achieve some sort of recognition was really, really meant a lot. And I had grown up watching the state tournaments and specifically watching the state basketball tournament because it was on TV. I knew all about the First Bank all tournament team.
Oh yeah.
It's First Bank at the time.
That's right.
And I knew all about that. And so when my coach came and told me I'd made it, I was very emotional.
Yeah.
Very emotional. That was kind of that first like tip of the hat on a statewide level where they were like,
yeah,
you've really
there's
done
a lot underneath that, right? When you think of the journey, the pathway, all the influences that you've talked about, it all culminates in things like that. It's never necessarily a singular game or singular tournament. It's everything that kind of pours into it for sure. So I don't think it's anything that athletes to apologize for, right? That it's not necessarily the external validation. It's really about what it's who you've become in the process, which is being affirmed, which I think is the fascinating part about it.
That affirmation that you're doing it right.
Yeah.
And that affirmation that, it's really up to you what you want to do. The time, if you put your time and you put your effort into it, you're going to see results. And as long as you're willing to put that time and effort in, you're going to continue to see those results. And when it stops being fun, then it's time to stop putting that time and effort in and maybe putting it into something else.
Right.
But that process was huge. And I will say too, it was that summer after my sophomore year of high school was when I really decided, I want to play at the next level.
Okay.
I don't know if I want it to be volleyball or basketball, but I know I want to. So that was that first summer that I did both AAU and JO volleyball at the same time. Okay. And it was really hard. But you couldn't have told me no. If my parents were always like, should we have let you do all that? Because I ended up having to have my right shoulder reconstructed when I was 20 from hitting the ball so many times.
No kidding.
But yeah, I did.
Okay.
Just rotator cuff, needed to have that fixed my sophomore year of college. But you could not, if they would have said, we can't let you do JOs and AAU, you've got to pick one. I would have been crushed.
Sure.
If you would have told me you can't play 3 sports in high school, you've got to pick one, I would have been crushed because I didn't know which was my favorite. And my favorite, because I was so competitive, success to me was winning. That's just for me, right? Sure. Like that was success because that was also what happened with the team. Success for me wasn't scoring 20 points in a game. If we had less points than the other team on the scoreboard at the end, that's a failure to me. Then I didn't do enough for the team to win. But, the W for me was the success. And to me, every practice, every tournament, traveling around the country, I missed I missed a lot of things with friends. Never got to do a spring break trip in high school. Never, although my parents wouldn't have let me anyways, but even if I wouldn't have had sports, but you miss out on a lot of stuff too. But it was all because I wanted to be moving in that direction to where I was going to be able to have the most success and that I was going to be able to have the most success with my teammates. And so all of it was worth it because then you'd get to see that on the other side. And geez, how blessed was I to even have that opportunity? My sophomore year when I started doing AAU and JOs, I didn't have my license. My mom drove me all around the Twin Cities to the shed in Burnsville for volleyball. And then my AAU coach, we'd practice often in Woodbury. There were days that I had both AAU and JO practice. There was a couple of days where I had a golf tournament. My mom picked me up. We went to JO practice, left JO practice, and we went to AAU practice. That wasn't uncommon for me. And I loved it. And you couldn't tell me to slow down. You couldn't. And if you would have, it wouldn't have been pretty for anyone.
Well, there's a couple things there. I mean, there's a very much a self-awareness, right, about who you are, kind of how you're wired, some of that nature, but then the the nurture is the opportunity to be a part of it, right? And that there's a price to be paid for anything in life, right? Whether that's in a career or a relationship or certainly in sports. And people are willing to pay different prices, right, for their goals and dreams. That's just and there's a lot of things that vary into that. But I mean, you can't not do those things. There's going to be some trade-offs, right? The lack of a spring break,
Right.
this, but that's all about what it is. So all that being said, you've painted a real vivid picture for golf and volleyball. Let's talk about basketball for a minute, right? Which is, for the casual fan, is probably the thing that they may remember the most, because you had that pinnacle experience in the 95-96 winter season. But again, when you think of that basketball experience at the high school for you, who are the people, or maybe what are the moments that stick out most, and kind of what resonates with you to this day as again, most memorable, most significant, kind of what sticks out to you when you think about that journey? Because it certainly was an exciting one.
Right. It was. So that 95-96 season was just unbelievable. And it was all kind of written in the stars. And as I had, alluded, I had some of that state tournament experience in golf, then went on to the fall of 95 and was able to gain that state tournament experience in volleyball. And that was with my incredible teammates. Rachel Reuter was setting, Molly Weber, we had Jody Dibble, Katie Larson. I'm going to forget other people too, but I bring those names up because 8 out of the 15 girls on that volleyball team were on the basketball team.
There you go.
So we had a little experience under our belt going into the 95 state tournament, or the 96 state tournament for basketball, because we had just gone for volleyball and we hadn't done very well, So we really wanted an opportunity to turn that around, and we were able to do that. And it just so happened that 8 of those girls came, directly from that volleyball team to then go over to winning the state championship in basketball. I'm jumping ahead here.
It's okay.
So basketball for me was my last varsity sport. It came when I was a freshman. I had the opportunity to play. Melissa Young was our coach that year. She was only at Hastings for 1 year before, of course, the great Nikki Scholl came to coach the next 3 years. But we had a great season. 9th grade was fun. Much like volleyball, I was an unknown. So that was the 1 year and the one time that I got to come in and teams weren't building defenses to shut me down.
Right.
So that was a lot of fun. And I was basically playing our center when I was a freshman.
Okay.
So it was a blast from the standpoint of that. It was really physical, and I was prepared for that because the summer of 8th grade was the first year that I played AAU for North Tartan. So I spent that summer, playing against other 8th graders across the country, but getting an idea of what that physicality was going to be like at the varsity level. And so that really kind of catapulted me to success my freshman year, because, the talent in AAU is just so crazy that a lot of times you're playing against other 8th graders, but it's basically varsity talent that you're playing against. Just a little bit different from a size standpoint, 8th grader to seniors. But then by the time I was a freshman, I was pretty much done growing. So I was 5'11", 6 feet in the program.
There you go.
Tom Ditty says you don't play basketball barefoot. So take your height with your basketball shoes on. So I was 6 feet in the program. Yeah, it was just a blast. I had, a couple years of varsity golf experience under the belt, which was great. But as far as team varsity experience, I had gotten a little bit in 8th grade. They had moved me up just for regions as an 8th grader to play with the varsity team. I didn't play at all, but just was there and was a part of it. Got that experience. So cool. Provided some comedic relief when I could.
That's right.
And then as a freshman, then, was able to come in and just feel a lot more comfortable. And I had just had a hugely successful freshman volleyball debut where I was all conference, and we had made it to the region championship. Mm-hmm. So we were bringing in the fans, and that was kind of people's first glimpse at, whoa, who is this Erin Ditty girl? She is really intense, but it seems like a lot of fun. And man, she can play. And so then for varsity basketball, I just had a little more confidence under my belt. I was a little bit more comfortable. and came out that freshman year and led the conference in the scoring. And again, I think it was, a little bit easier because I wasn't on anyone's radar yet.
Mm-hmm.
I did not lead the conference in scoring my sophomore year. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
But then other teammates stepped it up and did. But I'll remember this I was a freshman and my dad told me, he always said, do you want to be an athlete or do you want to be a basketball player? Do you want to be, and he was always just challenging me to keep my options open, to do it all as long as you could. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe you tear your ACL and then your only option for a college scholarship is golf. Yep. And he's keep your options open, don't pigeonhole yourself before and before I even really knew my true potential.
Sure.
So, and he also said to me, keep this in mind. And this is how he reminded me that the team was always the most important than the whole. And he would always do it because he knew how important it was to me that I wanted to be known as a great athlete. And he said the greatest athletes put entire teams on their shoulders and march them all to victory. Mm-hmm. And that has always stuck with me. Mm-hmm. You have great individual athletes, great, but who lifts up the intensity of those around them? Who makes everyone else on the floor play better? Or who will put that team, who will put themselves on the line and take the big shot or make the big hit, knowing full well there's a good chance you'll miss. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Knowing, and then if you do, it's on you. But you're saying, screw it. I'll do it. I'll do it for you guys. And that's what you did. And then now junior year, and now we've got the likes of Katie Ertel. We've got Rachel Reuter. We've got Leslie Miller. We've got Katie Larson. So we've got Molly Weber as a reserve. We've got Bessie Talifas as a reserve. So we've got this whole big group. And then, of course, the great Kenny Augustine and our amazing coaching staff of Nikki Shaw, Pete Zach, Gary Burr. Mm-hmm. Just an unbelievable cohesive group. Danny Mace would keep our stats. And then you just think of that cohesive group, and it's just no coincidence that we did something magical. Mm-hmm. We had known each other our entire lives. Mm-hmm. We had not played together our entire lives. Right. Some of them I had spent a good majority of my life competing against. Sure. But at this point now we're juniors. We've all become friends. And we would do anything for each other. I'm telling you, we would do anything for each other. And if you go back and you watch any of those games, you can see it. Yeah. You can see it. I was known for being a very intense competitor. Mm-hmm. And to a fault at times. I would never compare my talent to Michael Jordan. But watching The Last Dance, mm-hmm. my leadership on the court was a lot like him. Like that, sure. Like he would be brought to tears sometimes because he felt so bad about how he would act sometimes. Mm-hmm. And he was never like an all-out jerk, but he was so raw and so brutally honest. Mm-hmm. And that was me. And it was at times could be very difficult for my teammates. Again, I think that's why I developed a great sense of humor. I was almost like making up for how intense I was on the court. Sure. The minute we'd get off, it was like Jekyll and Hyde. Like I would just be wanting to make everyone laugh, to kind of make up for the intensity. But at the same time, now we've been together for so long that the intensity really isn't held against me anymore. They understand now. It's just how I'm built. Mm-hmm. And this is who I am. And they've been around me long enough to understand that. But B, by this point, they realize that I actually want to win for them just as much, maybe even a little more than I want to win for myself at this point. Right. Yeah. And that came to fortitude at the very end of the state championship game. And I don't know if I've ever told Katie this, but every time I watch it,
tell a story. Let's do it.
Yeah. So we're at the very end. We're going into the last quarter. Jeez Louise, I'm getting a little emotional.
So real quick to clarify, so you're talking, so this is the state championship game, right? State championship game. You're playing Osseo, who was, at least in the public eye, an overwhelming favorite in the game. Just so we kind of know the context of what we're talking about. So 4 quarters in
Absolutely.
basketball at the time. We didn't have 2 halves like we do now. So I'm just
Oh
kind of
my
helping,
gosh, yes.
helping you set the stage a little bit. So with all that being said, walk us through it. What's the memory?
Yeah, it's the state championship game where if we're lucky, we're gonna, only lose by double digits. But no one really gave us a chance at winning that game. In fact, it was the governor of Minnesota at the time, Arnie Carlson, had gone in the paper that morning and just had said that it was really a shame that the state championship had been decided the night before when Osseo and Rochester Mayo played. And that they needed to seed the tournament going forward because it was just really tragic that the semifinal game determined the state champion. Well, I mean, in retrospect, he had a point, right? But we're sitting there reading this going, wait, we're playing the state championship game tonight. So, I mean, ignorance is bliss, right? Everyone else thought we were going to get killed, but we're like, hey, we're playing some great basketball. And so we had come home the night before so everyone could sleep in their bed at home that night, went to the high school gym, had a nice shoot around. And then it was Pete Zach that read the article to us after the game. And it was someone said, I don't know, we should write Governor Carlson a letter. And then Pete Zach said, no, we should just go out and win. And we were all like, yeah. So it was pretty cool. We actually, for that game, took a coach bus up to Williams Arena. Tom and Margaret Kniff had driven us to every volleyball and basketball game that season and the 2 seasons prior. But they were understanding that we got to take that nice coach bus up there. And then they still came up in the yellow bus too. They brought the equipment up, I believe. And then we got to the game, and before the game, the coaches played a snippet of the locker room scene of Gene Hackman talking to his players in the movie Hoosiers right before they go out on the court to do the unthinkable. And that's what our coaches played for us in the dark room. And then Gene Hackman says, I love you guys. And then the lights go on and it's game time. Yeah. And he said, I love you guys. The lights came on and we ran out onto that court. And the rest is history. We were that first quarter, we got down, battled back, had the game tied by halftime. It was only 25-25. Not a very high scoring game. Definitely some nerves, but there was great defense by both teams being played and outstanding rebounding by both teams. So neither team was getting the second shots that they normally did. And Osseo's center was 6'4". Our biggest girl was 6 foot
with her shoes on.
Right. I did air quotes there. 6 foot with her shoes on. And Leslie Miller was a good 6 foot. Leslie had a little bit on me.
Yeah.
But then, Katie Larson was about 5'10". Yeah. But Katie was a leaper. Yeah. But anyways, we got past halftime, and in the third quarter, we found ourselves down 9 points. And it was late in the third quarter. And with about 1 minute and 15 seconds left, we went on an 11-0 run. That was capped off by Bessie Talifas hitting an NBA length 3-pointer. First 3-pointer she had attempted the entire state tournament. She drained it. And she was a great shooter. Still one of the best free throw shooters I've ever seen. But Bessie took the shot when she had it. They left her open and she made them pay for it. So we go into the fourth quarter, we're up by 2 points. And it is rocking. There's 9,000 people in Williams Arena. It is so loud. No one was expecting this to be a game. Dick Bramer's doing the play-by-play. It's still fun to run into Dick. He'll wave at me or my dad because he remembers that game. Oh, yeah. And then Janet Carvinen was doing the color, and we got into the fourth quarter and we just stuck with them. We kept going. We weren't giving it up. We were such a blue collar team, and that made us really fun to watch. And we had to be because we were smaller than everyone, but we would out rebound teams that were much bigger than us. Anyways, it got down to that fourth quarter. We are up by 1 point. And something happens where they end up, there's less than a minute to go, like 50 seconds left in the game. And they call a double dribble on Katie Ertel. It wasn't. I've watched that play so many times. It wasn't. The ball got hit out of her hand.
Sure.
Anyways, we turned the ball over and Katie is in like shock. And it's like, what? And I'm usually one when someone, something happens. I'm like, come on, and I went right up to her and I was like, no big deal. Let's go. We went to the bench. And that's not like me to say no big deal because it was a really big deal.
Yeah.
But first of all, I knew she didn't double dribble. I was right there. And second of all, there was no emphasis I wanted on that play because if we lost, I wanted no emphasis on that play because I did not want Katie feeling that play had any, bearing in that loss. And I tell you what, from that point on, in my head, after that turnover, I said, I will die before we lose this game because I know Katie will blame herself and I will die before I let this girl in any way, shape, or form think this, because it wasn't her fault. B, it never comes down to one play. Right. Any real athlete knows that. But there's no way you would have been able to tell her that. Right. And likely if I would have missed one of the free throws that I ended up, making. And at that point, I think, no, I hadn't hit the free throw yet, or I had hit the free throw that put us ahead by one. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But I remember very vividly turning from, and at that point, yes, I still wanted to win for my team. But at that point, it was all about Katie. And it worked.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why we won. I stopped
you
thinking
tap
about
into
myself.
different motivations at different times.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would have steamrolled anyone to do it. It's just, it wasn't going to happen. And then, the other story of that too, Trent, kind of cool. I've always had an amazing relationship with my parents. Mm-hmm. My mom is the greatest woman I'll ever know. And my dad is just an awesome guy and raised a daughter in a time when it wasn't super popular for dads to be out working out with the girls all the time but we spent a lot of time together in the gym and he didn't mind that I was a girl. He just, knew that I liked to compete and he facilitated that. But growing up, I always heard about his heartbreak games and his senior year playing for Delano High School. They played in the region semifinals and the region finals at Williams Arena. Okay. And that was when there was only one class. Mm-hmm. So they won the semifinal game. Dad hit a shot with like a minute left in the game that ended up giving them the lead for good. And then the region final game came again at Williams Arena. Delano High School, I think he had a class of like 40 kids. They played Bloomington Jefferson. So like kind of real life Hoosiers, kind of. Yeah. And so they're playing Bloomington Jefferson at Williams Arena. Anyways, it came down to it. Game-winning shot. My dad missed it. And he spent his whole life like having nightmares about this shot that he missed. And I think that's why he had my buns in the gym every Sunday. So he's like, when Erin gets a chance to hit the game winner, she'll hit it, hopefully. So anyways, that, did have a 9 points in that fourth quarter against Osseo that really pushed us through there. Again, no one scores 9 points without 4 other players on the floor, rebounding, passing, press breaking. Katie just made it pointless to press us. Mm-hmm. And, but yeah, was able to hit the game winning free throws and that game winning baseline shot that put us ahead for good. And I ran over to my dad on the sidelines after he had spent my whole life telling me about the nightmare of that game and how he still had dreams about it. And the first thing he said to me when he squeezed me out was like, we did it. And he was emotional and he just said, I will never have my nightmare again.
There you go.
Ever. He's like, you just released me from my nightmare. And he was like, I would have missed that shot every day of my life if it knew I was going to get to watch you make one on the same floor. Mm-hmm. So the lessons there too, sometimes the opportunities, that we may see as, failures or defeat, they actually become victories. It's just at a much later time, at a much later time. But how cool for me to be able to A, play where he played. Yeah. B, I grew up going to watch the Gophers in Williams Arena my whole life.
Yep.
And then to win the state championship on that floor. And it was the last year of the 2-class system as well.
Oh, sure.
So it was the last year of just A and AA.
Yep.
So that's a lot of teams to come out on top from. And we just had the best support system. And I talked about Tom and Margaret Kniff driving the bus earlier. Well, Tom Regan had provided us with that coach bus from the Hastings Bus Company to make us feel like celebrities going up. And we had it for that whole time we were up in the cities. But then after we won the state championship, we went out to get on the bus, and then we saw Tom and Margaret in the yellow limousine and the yellow school bus. And Pete and Zach kind of looked over at us, and we looked at him, and we just got off the coach bus and we went over and we got on the yellow school bus and we drove back to Hastings.
Yep.
We drove back to Hastings with Tom and Margaret, and I can't claim it was my idea, but the minute someone brought it up, we were like, well, yeah, of course we're going to ride back with them. And we left all of our equipment, all of our bags, and all of our stinky, sweaty gear on the coach bus.
Perfect.
And we drove home with Tom and Margaret, and I know Pat didn't mind at all. I think he was pretty dang proud of us for that. But
yes.
Tom and Margaret, bless them both, they were the best. They were really proud to see us go from, not having as much success in the state volleyball tournament to the ultimate success in the state basketball tournament. Yeah. So, made for a challenging senior year. Boy, it was one thing as a sophomore to come back and compete after people watched you in your conference freshman year. It was very difficult coming back and competing as a senior after the whole state watched you win a state championship on TV. So now everybody's best games are going to be against the Raiders.
That's right.
We were good enough where not all teams could just focus on me defensively. They had to focus on other players too. That's why we were so good, but it was a lot tougher senior year. It was after having so much success junior year, but that's the way it goes. But nothing could take away that junior year and that experience. And boy, just being a teammate has just made me a better person. I'm a better wife. I'm a better mom. I'm a better friend. I'm a better community member. Mm-hmm. Because I've been taught from such a long age that the whole is always the most important aspect, than just the individual. And I feel really lucky for that. And
awesome.
I mean, you talk about someone who's been molded by her community. That would definitely be me. Okay. You hear that from the names I've spoken about today too, how much Hastings has meant to me. And I get back whenever I can. I don't have family there anymore. I have some family. I have a couple cousins there, but my parents aren't in town anymore, but I still get back every chance I can. And I still have yet to see a better home football field than Todd Field and McNamara Stadium.
Got that right. Much. And you've been around.
That's right.
So
I've been all over the country.
Yeah.
I've been everywhere.
We try to keep it that
and
way.
We've still got the best.
That's right.
Still got the best.
Well,
and I still say we notice.
That's right. Absolutely.
It's
a shared hallowed ground there. That's right. Man.
Absolutely.
Well, I got couple things I want to ask you to close. You've done a great job in the last 5 to 10 minutes in particular. I always like asking, how those sports experiences impact your life today. You've articulated that, talk about the significant people or influences that have boosted you up, or kind of what the community meant to you. You've articulated that, which it's like you were ready for them before I even asked them, which is great. Let me just ask you this. Just tell us a little bit about your family now. You referenced it a little bit, right? Tell people about, where you live, your family unit, and just how is athletics still a part of your life, either as a family, or you kind of hinted on a little bit how it's kind of impacting your approach just as an adult. Maybe touch on those a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've been really blessed to live in the Fargo, North Dakota area now for the last, it's been okay, I'm going to start that over because this hasn't been 13 years. My son is 14. So it has to be, it's like I refuse to admit.
Those dang kids, they grow up on you.
I know.
Call them by the wrong names. You forget what grade they're in.
My husband Ben and I have been fortunate enough to call Fargo home for the last 16 years. It's been wonderful here. Ben works as the director of project management for a local company here that does precast concrete. They actually did the concrete for US Bank Stadium and a couple of the Alliance Field,
Oh, yeah.
Allianz, if I'm saying that right.
Cool.
Field. So he gets down to the cities for some of his work too. But and then I actually work for some local nonprofit organizations. I am just kind of an independent consultant that they contract to run social media and marketing for their nonprofit. So
Nice.
It's been a great way for me to balance my time as a mom while still working on my craft.
Yeah.
And then I have two amazing boys. I have Tommy and Danny. Tommy is 14 years old. He just started his freshman year at Cheyenne High School here in West Fargo. He is a 3-sport athlete. Most importantly, he's a really, really great, nice kid, young man. But he's a 3-sport athlete. He does football, basketball, and baseball. I've spent a lot of years coaching him in basketball, which was a lot of fun. Kind of opened some people's eyes around here too, to how effective female coaches can be.
Right.
we won some tournaments and turned some heads. Awesome. But it was a lot of fun over the years, getting to coach him in basketball. Ben coached him in football, baseball, watching him play all over the country. And so it's going to be fun to watch him grow. And it's already fun to watch how much he's learned, in dealing with his emotions and in handling and navigating disappointment. All those things that you have to learn how to do just for life in general, that he's already learned to do and has some experience with through his involvement in sports.
Sure.
Which I know from experience will make things a little easier on him later in life, just having that experience and learning. And I think another big one too is learning to be happy for those around you.
Right. Learning
that, hey, maybe I only had 6 points that game, but our team won. So I'm going to be happy for our team's victory. And if I have any issues with my individual appointments, I'm going to address that at home with my family and in private. Yep. But when it comes to our time with the team here, our team just won. So we're going to be really happy. So those types of things that are really important and make things easier as you get older. When you have that capacity to be happy for those around you when things are going well, when maybe for you personally, they aren't going as well. Mm-hmm. And, it's been fun watching him learn that. And then it's just a trip seeing him in high school now. I remember my freshman year of high school so vividly. It's crazy to think that's what he's doing now. But it's going to be really fun to watch him grow up. He's my giant, flat foot. He's 6'4", and he's wearing size 17 shoes.
Oh boy.
And he's 14. He'll be 15 in January, and he's really excited because in North Dakota, that's when you get your driver's license.
Okay.
My joke is North Dakota is like one big farmer's permit. Sure. Remember when the farmer kids got to get their license when they were 15? Yeah, Molly Weber would drive in from the farm and pick me up. It was the greatest. Yeah. Well, North Dakota is all farmer permits, so they're all 15. But he's really looking forward to that. So it's fun seeing him in an age that I can so vividly remember.
Sure.
And like I said, he's a good
jump
kid.
Shot over that long arm in the driveway. I mean,
oh my gosh, it's
sure when that's not.
I know. I'm not gonna be able to do it. Well, he's not in a game or anything, but he can dunk, and so that's just like I watched him do that, and it was just really humbling to watch him do something that I spent half of my childhood going to bed at night praying that I would be able to do someday.
There you go. That's awesome.
So, and then my youngest, Danny, is 10. He's a 5th grader. He, not as big into sports, but is starting to enjoy them a little more. He's kind of like me and just has interests everywhere. Like I was always in choir all through high school. Mr. Warren was a great influence me in high school. We got to travel for national choir competitions too. That was so fun. And, different things like that. But it's just kind of those all-encompassing experiences that I really look forward to for Tommy to hear, even beyond sports. And for Danny, as I said, he'll probably be more of maybe a choir buff, but now he just started padded football this year and he loves it. So
their way.
He's not quite as tall as Tommy maybe, but he's still tall.
Okay.
Maybe he might not be as tall as Tommy is, but he's put together. He plays O-line and D-line. So
Awesome.
we've got a long and lanky, and we've got a little shorter and stacky, but they're a blast. And like I said, they're good kids. I'm proud of what they do at school and how they make others feel.
Well, people love to hear that update just on kind of where you are and where they're doing and what they're doing, all that kind of stuff. Let me do this. I'm gonna ask you for a couple pieces of advice for the audience, and then I'll give you the final word if there's anything else you want to share. So you've had an incredible journey as an athlete yourself. You're also now a sports parent yourself. I mean, you've seen athletics and competitive sports from a million different lenses. If there's a parent or two listening to this, and you could give them one piece of advice on being the best sports parent they can be for their own kids, what would it be? This is one of the tough questions, by the way. I'm going to give you
I know the answer, and I've already alluded to it. Teach your kids how to be happy for other people. Teach your kids how to be happy for other individuals' success. When we have the ability to genuinely appreciate and to genuinely support our teammates or even our competitors, and we show that, not only are we exhibiting the ultimate sportsmanship, but guess who's going to be your biggest fan? And guess who's going to cheer the loudest when you succeed? Them.
I love it.
So I would say that is going to nurture an environment of success. It's going to nurture an environment where your child understands that it's okay when they don't have the best, when they're not the best. And then it's also going to nurture the fact that when your child does succeed, everyone around them is going to be happy and excited about it, because they're going to show the same happiness and excitement that you and your child showed for them. That's how you build community.
Awesome.
That's how you build a team. That's how you build camaraderie. That's how you build trust. When you show people that you're genuinely happy for their success. And then the love and the happiness that comes back when you succeed is bigger and better than you could ever imagine, because you're getting back all that you gave.
Okay.
And there's just so much. I feel like a lot of parent-child discussion should really be, yes, here's what you could do better. But look what that kid did today. That was great. That was awesome. Pointing out the positives in others rather than the negatives in the individual can be really helpful in that aspect too. But yeah.
Okay.
Got to be able to be happy for other people.
I love it. So you've also
makes life better too.
Oh yeah. So you've played for dozens and dozens of coaches in a wide variety of environments. Same question, different audience. So you've got a high school coach listening to this, right? After all of those experiences, if you could give a high school coach today one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think one thing that I always had, and I noticed this, we were volunteering, working the concession stand for our son's high school football team. And it was the varsity basketball coach that was in the concession stand with us. And I gave him a compliment. And I said, what I like is that all your kids are very respectful and they listen to you, but they're all having a blast. They're all very comfortable being themselves. And I would say that to the high school coaches, is that this is just such an important a part of that, that 9th through 12th grade is such a development time where kids are learning to be themselves and learning to be comfortable enough to be themselves. And as someone who was always high energy, adding in the humor, you could usually hear me before you saw me, as someone like that, I never had any of that taken away from me. I was always encouraged to be myself. I never felt like I had to kind of be quiet and in this box and fit in this. Okay, you can be this great athlete, but then you also have to be, seen and not heard, or you need to act a certain way. There was never an opportunity where I was not fully allowed to be myself.
Okay.
And I think that for coaches, you can still very much have authority. You can still very much express your leadership and have kids that respect, admire, and would go to the moon and back for you. But at all that, you can still be allowing them to be comfortable to be themselves. and allowing them that if they are higher energy, okay, I'm going to be a little patient. I'm going to be patient with Erin Ditty. She's high energy. We're going to let her get it out of her system. And then every once in a while, we'll just remind her that we're, we need to hold it down a little bit. But that was important for me because what I was doing wasn't necessarily what all my friends were doing. I had really good friends that were teammates, but I also had I have a really close-knit group of girlfriends that weren't my teammates. And so, we weren't all doing the same things. We weren't all going through the same things. We weren't all experiencing, positives at the same time. I experienced negatives too. I'll say this, I walked into Tartan High School one time, junior year, and there was a poster on their cafeteria wall, huge. It said, "Rip the Raiders." And then it was a drawing of me. And they had ripped off my head. They had ripped off my arms. And they had ripped off my legs. Jeez. And it was number 22. It was number 22. She had the ponytail on top of her head and everything. And it did hurt my feelings because I'm a woo. I like to win people over. I loved having, super competitive, but still wanted to be able to shake hands at the end of the game and be friends. Yeah. And so, it stung. I remember my teammates getting really quiet too, and they looked upset. But no one really said anything. And it was a huge game, and Tartan was really good. So I told my son, I saw that poster. I'm like, you know what I said? He said, "What?" I said, "Nothing. I scored 27 points. Leslie Miller scored 23. Rachel Reuter scored 21.
That's what you
my teammates were really mad too. Don't forget about the emotional support too. I had amazing emotional support. I didn't always handle everything great. I didn't always handle the pressure great. That night I scored 27 points, but I would go into other schools and there was drawings about me too.
But you got coaches got coaches that buoyed you through it. I think you framed it well. In terms
my gosh.
You did, and that's what. So, hey, last one of these in this thread to the athletes themselves then, right? Let's say you got a 16, 17-year-old kid, sophomore, junior, whatever it might be, they're listening. I know it's hard to pare it down to one thing, but if you could leave them with one thought or one piece of advice, what would you tell the athlete?
Kind of simple, but keep that growth mindset. If you really love what you're doing, don't be okay with the status quo. Don't be complacent. Keep pushing yourself. Keep going and seeing what you can accomplish, because oftentimes, that repetition and that practice creates results, and that muscle memory that takes over when we don't even think we're going to be able to do something, all of a sudden we do it. Yeah. I literally hit free throws at Williams Arena where I could see my hand shaking before I shot it. And if you would have asked me, I would have guessed I missed it, but I didn't. I made it. And it's that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Go out there and swing. It's so cliche, but it's so true. You're not going to have times in your life where you can try things just for the heck of trying new things. There's not going to be many times in your life where, you're going to be able to go play a sport and then be able to go home in the evening, relax, wake up, just go to school the next day and kind of do the whole thing again. Yeah. There's different, responsibilities that come up later in life. But if you keep that growth mindset and you remember that a loss is not a deficit, it's really going to pay off and, pay off huge for you in the future, because what we learn in loss, what we learn in defeat is so important, because that's what catapults us to victory in the future. And if you keep that in mind, if you're not afraid to fail, because even in mistakes, even in failure, our brain grows, we learn from it, and then we perform next time. So keeping that growth mindset, and then, not being complacent, keep pushing yourself. You have no idea what you can accomplish. Yeah. And then just remember, it's got to be fun. It does. It's got to be fun. And if it isn't, find something that is. And it's amazing what we can accomplish when we not only work hard, but when we're doing something that we're passionate about. No doubt. Sky's the limit. Yeah, absolutely. Sky's the limit.
I love it. Well, so final op before we wrap up is just to give you the mic for anything that may have popped in your mind that you want to share. It's really fun, I think, for people to have a chance to dial back into this, right? I mean, 15 varsity seasons. You've got multiple state tournament experiences across all three of your sports, right? You've got buckets full of all conference and all metro and all state awards, and a really awesome collegiate career that we'll get into on a different conversation. But it's just super fun to reconnect with you a little bit, let people walk back through some of these experiences, yet hear some things they probably didn't know, and hear what you're up to now, which is great. So anything else you want to share? You got the mic for the last minute. I'll give it to you.
I would just say what a blessing it was to grow up in the Hastings community. I almost got a little choked up a few times here talking about certain people today that just shaped and molded who I became. And I barely even talked about a fourth of the people that I could have.
Sure.
And it was nice to have the opportunity to kind of say thank you. Not many people, or I don't know how many people will listen to this, but anyone who is listening will walk away knowing that I'm extremely grateful to have been a Hastings Raider, and extremely grateful to have grown up in a community like Hastings, which is really a community not really paralleled by many other places in Minnesota, especially in that, Twin Cities metro area, when you have that small town feel when you're really not in a small town. And so I would just say thank you to anyone listening that, was a part of my journey and was patient with me when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
And just helped, shape me into who I am. And I'm a much better version of myself than I was at 18. And I know at 62, I'll be a much better version of myself than I am now at 42, but nothing will ever change, the time and the people that I met when I was in Hastings. And I would just say to any kids listening, just realize you've got something pretty special there. This has just been just a treat to talk about this and to think back. And I know I'm going to get off and think of 10 other people I should have mentioned.
Yep, you will. That's how it works.
But it sure is. But I just appreciate the opportunity. And I will always be a Hastings Raider. And I'll always be extremely proud of that.